Howdy folks, Littlestone here. Today I decided to make a video talking about a project that I'm starting on. I'm here at the Garden, which is an off-grid intentional community space in Tennessee, and the work that I'm doing today is I'm going to start weeding a patch of honeysuckle that has really taken over a part of the garden. And the purpose is to try to create a medicinal herb spiral or herb area where the honeysuckle is now. And so this is a job that is going to be a lot of hands-on work. From what I've read online, honeysuckle is one that if you just try to till it, it will simply reroot and spread, actually possibly even worse. And so really the best options are to either dig it by hand, making sure to get all of the root out, or to invite goats into the area to have them go to town on eating it. We don't have goats at the garden, so for now I'm starting by digging by hand, and there's a chance that a neighbor might lend us some goats, but I'm not counting on that. And since it's warm enough and sunny enough out, I think it's best just to start by hand. So I'm going to show you the area and talk a little bit about why I think it's important to make a medicinal herb garden in an intentional community space, and about how the herb garden might fit into this specific space. So right here is the little patch that I'm going to focus on first. I'll do a little walk around. As you can see, it's creeping honeysuckle, and it's, I guess, slowly been taking over this area and choking out trees that have been here, getting rid of, native grasses or other weeds that would otherwise like to be here. And if we let it continue, there's a chance it'll take over the whole garden. So instead, we're going to try to get rid of some of it. It is good for pollinators, and it does have medicinal uses in itself, but I think right now we actually have a little more than we need. And this is only one small patch with a little spruce tree, or no, a cedar tree in the middle. And in the background you can possibly see some other patches. I'm going to walk around. So here's more honeysuckle doing its thing, making a living in our soil. And then behind me, that's the kitchen area right there. There's an even bigger patch where it's really taking off. And if this weeding project works, down the line I would really like to turn this huge area that has been overgrown by honeysuckle into a really big herb spiral. And the reason I want to do that is because there are a lot of people who pass through this space. It's really not so much a community as a project space, but a lot of people who pass through and have various ailments, physical, psychological, whatever it might be that they might be seeking help for. And there are a lot of plants that are able to provide a bit of assistance with treating those kinds of conditions. And in a way, it's kind of like when you have an herb garden or any kind of garden, you can turn the land that you're on into your own little eBay or Amazon and provide whatever you really need on the land. So I've been in the process this winter researching herbalism and connecting with herbalists and trying to figure out a good way of making our own little Amazon here, so that we can really provide travelers with whatever kind of medicinal plants they might like. Not as necessarily as medical advice, but as just creating opportunities for people to empower themselves with plants. And I've used herbal plants a lot in my own health practices, and it's really taught me a lot about my body, and also about my relationship with nature. And kind of the theory behind herbal medicine, from what I've heard, is that plants really, they have their own immune systems. They need to take care of themselves in the wild, or in any kind of wild or domesticated area. And so they create their own defenses to deal with that, whether it's insects or viruses or bacteria, or just the stressors of the environment. And so they store up these either chemicals or compounds or maybe like proteins, other things, sugars in their bodies to deal with their own stresses. And when we consume these plants, they also transfer those same compounds, chemicals, sugars, whatever it might be, to our bodies, and they can heal us in that way. I personally think that the plants are alive, and well, I don't think many would argue with the idea that they're alive, but I think that they are conscious and they respond to their environment. They respond to us as a part of their environment, and I think a lot of plants have grown up with humans for many generations and have gotten to know us and have in some ways offered their bodies as a way of healing us. And so that's kind of my approach to herbalism or herbal medicine, is that I think the plants are aware at times that we have things that are hurting us or things that are making it hard for us to function as we'd like. And I think sometimes they will go out of their way to bring those things into their bodies for us. And that when we receive those things with appreciation, gratitude, and a sense of honor of nature, then we're able to really create healing in our bodies and our spirits and minds, and that we can be more at home in our bodies and in nature through that practice. So in addition to creating herbal medicine for people who are passing through, I also want this space to be a place where people can collect seeds. Seeds are amazing in that they can hold a huge storehouse of information of how to grow and survive for a single plant, just in a tiny little package. Sometimes they're small enough that they can fit in the groove of your fingerprint, and yet they can create this amazing plant that responds to its environment. You can communicate with it, and it is able to heal us and able to heal the soil, heal other animals that come into contact with it. And I think that's just incredible. So I'd love to be able to share seeds with other people. Another way of propagating plants is through cuttings, which again is amazing, that you can just take a stem from a lot of plants and stick it in the ground and it'll start creating roots. Essentially, that whole, the presence of that plant is stored throughout its whole body. And so when we take even a little bit of it, sometimes we can put that in the ground and recreate the whole plant. And so root cuttings, or root divisions, is another thing, kind of like cuttings, that we can share with people. And really, I think one of the most healing things that we can create with this herb garden is a space where people can reflect and can learn to communicate with plants person to person, and can find a little more peace within themselves and within their environment. So that's kind of what I'm bringing into this project. And this is in a space called the Garden, like I said at the start of the video. It's in Tennessee, and it's an off-grid project, community space, where people are welcome to come at any time and to help out in the garden. There are rules here, although there's no single leader, and as long as people are coming and contributing to the mission and not detracting from that, they're welcome to stay here pretty much indefinitely. And I know in the past we've had it so that people are asked to pay $10 every 2 weeks. At times, I think also they exempt people from that payment if people are trying to live without money. And that's one thing that really drew me to the space, is I felt it was putting into action a lot of values that are at the core of my heart, and that I found people here who I feel like I consider family. And so I'm planning on staying here from now, which is mid-March, until the end of summer or maybe into fall, and working on this project and others. We have chickens here, we have an outdoor kitchen, we have a dining area, we have an outhouse, which is a composting toilet. There's a large garden. I think it's probably about 2 acres, maybe a little more, and orchard, which hopefully will produce some nice fruit this year. And I'll show you around more of the community space later on. Yeah, I'm gonna go over back to the space that I'm gonna garden now and show you what I'm doing. Hi. So right now I'm at the start of a very long weeding project, and I'm tackling the honeysuckle patches that are overgrowing parts of the garden. And I just wanted to talk about the process and technique that I'm using and show you some of the tools that I have. So first of all, I have a dandelion weeder, and this is a handy tool because it's good for digging deep into the ground and pulling out tap roots or any other kind of root that is really going to be hard to get without breaking just by pulling with your hands. So I like using this tool because it gives me leverage too. It just makes it easier to work with the soil without being too disruptive to it, and really just trying to get only the parts of the weed out or the parts of the plants out that you're trying to. The other tool that I'm using right now is some work gloves, and I use these when pulling out weeds, especially thorny ones, because it saves my hands, keeps them from getting cuts or scratches in them, which can later on be painful if I'm trying to cook or do any other kind of work that involves hot water or acidic foods like peppers or citrus. So these are just two simple tools that I like to use when I'm weeding. I also like to have knee pads to save my knees. I'm only in my late 20s, but I prefer to be a little proactive about taking care of my body because I really want to be doing this long into my old age, and I think thinking ahead now is going to make that easier down the line. So I'm going to show you a little patch that I've started weeding. Right now it's just soil. I don't know if you can see that, but we've got some nice loamy soil right here, and before it looked more like that. And one of the challenges with weeding honeysuckle is that it's a rhizomatic plant. It has a rhizomatic growth pattern, and so basically what that means is it grows along the soil outward, putting out new roots as it grows. And so here's an example of what that looks like. If you look closely, you can see that there are little clusters of roots all along this rhizome. And so if I were to break it off right here and just call it a day with pulling that weed, the rest of this from there or there or there might continue to grow and put out more vegetative growth, more leaves, so it can pull more energy down into its root system, and really I won't have accomplished anything. So that's why it's important with this kind of weed to really be patient and thorough and to get as much out as you can. And here's an example of what the vining honeysuckle looks like. This is a vine that is kind of strangling another weed, if you can see right there. It's twisting all around it. It does that to trees, does that to anything it can get its hands onto, and it has these nice pretty little flower or leaf clusters. It also puts out nice sweet smelling yellow and white flowers that pollinators love. I personally like them too, but it's the enemy today because it's taking over more of the garden than we want it to. And that gets down to the question of what is a weed and why do we weed? Why do we pull weeds? Technically, there's no such thing as a weed. You know, everything is just a plant that's doing its job of holding down the soil, turning carbon dioxide into oxygen for us, and storing carbon and other nutrients in its body, in the soil. So all of these plants, you know, if nobody was here looking after this land, it would be great that these weeds, what we're calling weeds, have taken over and that they're doing their job. And so, but because we want to use this land in another way, we're going to consider these weeds, and that's kind of what the layman's definition is for a weed. It's any plant that's growing where you don't want it to be. So for now I'm considering these weeds and doing my best to get rid of them, but with a kind of spirit of appreciation and of gratitude for the work that they've done and that they would continue to do if nobody was here. it's important work that they're doing. And they're also creating food for insects. They're creating habitat for those insects to overwinter, or to hatch their larvae and plant their eggs, and also habitat for other wildlife, for rabbits, rodents, mice, things like that, which feed other animals in the ecosystem, owls, foxes, coyotes. And so really anything out here that I'm interacting with is an important part of the larger system, and not just something to consider a pest or a nuisance. So that's why, in some ways I don't like weeding. Not because it's tiresome. I actually kind of enjoy the process of being close to the soil, but because I realize that I'm disrupting habitat, or I'm disrupting the home of insects and other wildlife when I do that. And so I try to do it as little as possible, not because I'm lazy, but because I'm appreciative, and to do it thoughtfully. And already I was weeding and I came across some baby bunnies, and they were about as cute can get. So I felt bad intruding on their home, and knowing that in this process of trying to turn this space into a medicinal herb garden, I will have to get rid of a part of their home. And I'm going to be making attempts to leave that spot where I found the baby bunnies until last, so that hopefully they can grow old enough to be able to live on their own, and hopefully not eat our entire garden, but to respect them as they're natives of this land too. Hey all, quick update on the weeding. This is still day one. So I've been continuing to weed. As you can see, there's now more bare ground and a larger weed pile. And as I was weeding, I found a little egg of some sort, a cocoon, possibly from a wasp, possibly from a native bee, maybe from a beetle. I don't think beetles make fuzzy ones like this, but I just wanted to show you and talk about it. So I have it in my hand. I'll show it to you. It's got some dirt on it, and it's kind of fuzzy, a little bit sticky. It stuck to my finger just then. And I don't know what's in it. I have no idea what's in it, but I am going to preserve it and put it back in the soil and try to make sure it's covered well, because as I've been gardening more and getting to know the insects that fly around gardens, I've realized that they put a lot of effort into creating the next generation of insects, and that's a big part of what they're doing while they're flying around, is collecting pollen, collecting nectar, and either using that to create an egg within themselves, or I think sometimes they also will bury an egg somewhere and leave it some food so that when the insect hatches, when that egg hatches, it'll have something to eat so that it can get started on its life. And so I always try to preserve things like this, because I realize a lot of work went into creating and preparing the egg, and also that it's a miracle too that an insect can survive overwinter, in the ground, and that this little fuzzy package has been there all winter, waiting for the warmer weather to hatch. And I want to honor that, and maybe someday it'll see me in the garden and I'll get to smile at it and feel it smile at me, and it'll be buzzing around the same plants that I'm taking care of. And that is really, one of my favorite things about gardening. And so it's a long process for any insect that you see buzzing around, or maybe not any insect, a lot of insects that you see buzzing around, to reach the flower that you see them on, or to reach, the wrist that they land on. So I just wanted to share that, and yeah, show you a little update of the garden and how it's going. Okay, take care. Hello, baby. Oh, bye-bye. That was one of the little baby rabbits that I disturbed earlier by accident. I was working and thought I was out of their little range of their nest, but they actually came back out into sight again. I'm making eye contact with it now, and I think it's scared, and I feel bad about that. But I'm going to avoid this area too, to try to give the rabbit as much peace of mind as I can. And hopefully it'll do alright, and it'll grow healthy and not be afraid of humans all its life because of this. We'll see. But unfortunately, that's something you always are going to come across gardening and farming too. And so it's something that I think a lot of people don't consider much when they buy food, and something that I really had to reevaluate as I started growing more of my own food. I realized that a lot of harm to animals comes through the process of growing even organic, even just purely vegetable produce, and it's a responsibility that we have whenever we demand something or whenever we create something. We're taking on responsibility for our choices. And so I saw that even on a small organic farm that wasn't even a production farm, we were having to cage groundhogs, and sometimes they would die in the cages, and sometimes we would take them to another place to be relocated, and even that is most likely going to lead to the groundhog's death because they're out of their territory, they don't know that space, and it may even be the habitat of other groundhogs. So I try to be as conscientious of animals' well-being when I buy food or when I grow food, and there's really a limit to how much we can do that when we're just buying food from a store, or even often from a local grower. And it's something that weighed on my heart a lot last year, and I wanted to bring up, since I was reminded of the place that animals have in our food system. So while I'm digging around and pulling out honeysuckle, I'm also keeping an eye out for blackberry canes. My friend Sky, who's also living here at the garden, told me that this field once had a lot of blackberry canes in it, and there are still some that are growing under the pressure of the honeysuckle. And so while I was digging, I found one that I thought had a really cool symbiotic relationship going on with some moss. And so here it is, and as you can see, the moss is growing up here, and it is using the raspberry cane, or the root, I guess, of the raspberry as a little stage for its life. It's sitting on top of the part that will be above ground, and that allows it to get some moisture from the air. I think inside of all the weedy growth, there's a better chance that moisture would be retained longer than if it was like totally exposed. And so the moss needs something like that. It also has a nice firm hold on the blackberry cane because it's kind of like a rock, or a tree. It's something that's going to stay in place, stay there a long time, and give it a sure footing, long enough that the moss can grow, get some sunlight, some moisture from the air, and minerals from the air, and then release its spores into the air. And in return, the blackberry cane gets a really, really awesome looking hairdo. And that's it. Sky, what are you doing with all my honeysuckle?
I'm throwing it in my compost and it's taking over the land.
Your compost?
Yep.
What do you mean your compost?
My compost now.
I thought this was
the people's compost.
a community.
We're gonna turn it into good soil, hopefully.
Alright, so yeah, Sky just took off a big pile of the compost, or not compost yet, of the honeysuckle vines that I was weeding, and the sun is starting to go down. So I'm going to show how far I've gotten, and then later on I'll just do pictures, daily updates. Hopefully the weather will stay dry and nice enough that I can keep on weeding this area. It's a slow process. I feel like I did make good progress today. This guy is just going to get the rest of the honeysuckle. So, starting about here, you can see all this area has been weeded. And that is area that we can now turn into planting ground for medicinal herbs. And hopefully one day it can have nutrients in the soil that'll get turned into those plants and turned into healing for people. So that's all we've gotten as far as we've gotten today. And there's all this left. So if you want to help with this project or with other projects that we're doing at the garden, then you're very welcome to come and join us. As I said, we have a kitchen. Right now we have a kitchen bus that we're eating out of, and lots of good homemade food every day. There is a pond, which is before you, some hammocks, which are very comfortable, and a wooded area as well that has a stream with a few little waterfalls, and it's just very peaceful out here. You can probably hear the birds singing, and they're singing all day, and it's beautiful. Beautiful weather right now. So I hope to see you. We're in Lafayette, Tennessee. If you look at the Gardens webpage or the People's Project, you can find us. We also have a cool little library. I see it through the trees. And all are welcome who come with a peaceful spirit and intentions to change the world and make it a healthier, greener, more self-reliant and local place. So that's all for this video. I'll post pictures of the progress on the honeysuckle patch, and also maybe some other videos later on. Okay, thanks.